The great hall of the council rose like a fortress of stone, and light its windows tall and imposing, reflecting the cold brilliance of the sun above. Inside, the council members sat in their high chairs cloaked in robes that shimmered with authority and power, their faces impassive and unreadable far below. The villagers stirred with uneasy whispers and a chill that ran through the bones of every human who dared look toward the hall. The humans had long depended on the council for guidance, for protection, and for promises that now seemed hollow and meaningless. Mothers held their children close, whispering stories of better days, and fathers paced the streets, their hands gripping nothing yet trembling with the fear of what they could not control. The streets smelled of smoke, dust, and anticipation, a heavy tension that pressed down on everyone as if the very air was waiting for something to break the silence. The elders met in secret corners, their voices low and trembling, as they discussed the latest decree from the council, a decree that forbade aid, that turned its back on the outer colonies, leaving them to face the encroaching threat alone. They spoke of the fire that was coming, of the unknown force that had begun to consume forests and fields at the borders of the land of humans, and no plan seemed enough to stop it, no matter how clever or desperate their minds could be. A wind blew through the village square, carrying ash and whispers and the distant hum of life, unaware of its fragile position in the shadow of power and betrayal. Children peeked from behind doors, eyes wide with fear and curiosity, some asking questions that could not be answered, some crying softly into the folds of their mothers' skirts, while the young adults tried to mask their panic with faces set in grim determination. They moved quickly, organizing supplies, gathering what food they could carry, and readying weapons, sharpened blades and rough bows carved from the trees around them. Every step taken was a silent rebellion against the decision made above, yet there was no hope of overturning the council. No shouting, no pleading, no protest could change the course that had been set. The council had made its choice, and humans were left to stare into the cold distance of an uncertain horizon. A messenger arrived, riding fast through the narrow lanes, his horse panting and covered in sweat and dust. He bore a scroll that confirmed the rumors and fears the council had declared them unworthy of rescue, a word that landed in the hearts of villagers like a hammer striking iron. They gathered in the open square, their heads bowed and hands clenched, yet amid the despair something flickered, a tiny spark of defiance that grew quietly as they looked at one another, knowing that if no help would come from above, then they would find strength within themselves. The wind shifted and carried the faint scent of smoke from the forests beyond, a reminder of the danger that crept ever closer. And as the council continued its meeting far above, the humans made their first silent vows to endure, to survive, and to face whatever horrors awaited them with courage born of desperation. In the cold light of dawn, every shadow seemed longer, every sound sharper, yet there was a determination in their steps, a slow, steady building of resolve that no decree could extinguish. As the sun climbed higher, the council remained aloof and distant, but below in the villages the humans began to prepare for a journey into uncertainty, a journey that would test every limit and leave no one unchanged. The betrayal of the council had marked them, but it had not broken them, and the first embers of defiance glowed quietly in hearts that refused to be abandoned. Smoke drifted over the horizon, curling like fingers of an unseen hand, and the villagers felt it before they saw it, a warning carried on the wind that made hearts pound and stomachs twist. The whispers began in hushed tones from doorways and alleyways, from children clutching ragged dolls and elders leaning on twisted canes. The fire was coming, they said, unstoppable. It was coming to devour everything in its path, yet no one knew its origin or the reason for its wrath. The humans moved quickly, as if the very air had shifted beneath their feet. They gathered in clusters, trading rumors and stories of what lay ahead. Some spoke of flames that burned like living creatures with teeth and eyes that glowed red in the night. Others spoke of forests collapsing into ashen, villages swallowed whole by smoke and heat. The scent of charred wood hung faintly in the wind, carrying both fear and a strange thrill. The young warriors checked their weapons, sharpening blades and fletching arrows, while their eyes darted to the sky, scanning for signs of danger. Mothers tied scarves around their faces and wrapped children tightly in blankets, whispering prayers and lullabies that clung to the air like fragile hope. Fathers moved through the streets, with hands clenched, ready to defend, to fight, to die if necessary, but deep in their hearts they knew this was a trial far beyond any battle they had faced before. The elders called secret meetings in shadowed corners of abandoned buildings, their voices trembling with urgency and authority. They debated what could be done, how to survive, and whether escape was possible there. Words were heavy with knowledge of the council's betrayal, and the bitter truth that no aid would come from above. The winds shifted and carried embers from distant fires, or perhaps from the imagination of frightened minds, and the villagers felt the heat on their skin, a subtle warning, a reminder that time was slipping through their fingers like sand in a storm. The children clung to mothers and siblings, whispering questions that had no answers, eyes wide and faces streaked with tears and soot. The young adults tried to mask their fear with grim faces, moving quickly, organizing supplies, food and water, weapons and blankets. Every motion carried the weight of necessity. Every glance between neighbors carried silent communication, trust and understanding without words. They began to prepare for a march into uncertainty, into danger, into a fire that would not forgive mistakes. The horizon darkened with smoke, and the hum of life in the forests seemed to quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. A messenger arrived on a horse, black with sweat and foam, carrying a message from a neighboring village, a warning of flames and ash, moving faster than any wind, and humans trapped in fields unable to flee. The villagers listened, their hearts pounding as they absorbed the reality that the threat was real and relentless. And then something unexpected happened. In the fear, in the despair, in the whispered doom, a quiet murmur of determination began to rise, first from one, then another, until the villagers spoke aloud, pledges to protect, to endure, to survive. If the council would not help, they would help themselves. The fire would not claim them without a fight, and the first steps of preparation were taken. The humans gathered in small groups, testing courage and planning routes, watching the horizon and feeling the heat on their faces, and in their souls knowing that the council had abandoned them, but that the spirit of the people would not be abandoned. A low wind carried the scent of smoke through the streets and into the hearts of humans, who now whispered not just of doom but of defiance. A spark had been struck, and the march toward fire would soon begin. The village square was filled with an uneasy silence, broken only by the whispering wind and the soft sobs of those who knew the end of comfort was near. Families gathered in tight clusters, embracing with trembling hands and tear-streaked faces. Mothers pressed children to their chests, whispering stories of courage and love that would linger even if they did not. Mothers kissed foreheads and cheeks, holding the small bodies as if their warmth could stave off the coming fire. Fathers moved among them, speaking in low voices, giving instructions and promises that sounded hollow even as they tried to make them real. Each word carried the weight of hope and fear. At once they spoke of survival, of finding strength, of holding together for even a moment without breaking. The young ones clung to elders, looking for guidance, for reassurance that the world was not entirely cruel. Their eyes wide and shining, they tried to understand the gravity of what lay ahead, but comprehension was only partial. What they felt fully was the cold claw of fear curling around their hearts. In the corners of the square, the villagers gathered their belongings, small bundles of food, water and blankets tied carefully and placed onto backs and shoulders. Every motion was deliberate, every movement carried the echo of urgency. The air smelled of smoke and earth and sweat and the faint metallic temps of fear. Children hid small keepsakes beneath their clothing, pressing them to chests, hoping the objects could hold memories of a world that was slipping away. Some whispered goodbyes to pets and animals that could not follow, while others waved silently to neighbors they might never see again. The elders spoke once more, gathering the villagers around their huddled circles, their voices strong now, carrying authority and conviction. They reminded everyone that stepping forward into danger was the only choice left, and that turning back would mean despair and the loss of what little they could still protect. Some wept openly, and some stared silently into the distance, as if staring could summon a different outcome. The young adults formed protective rings around the children, their hands clutching bows, blades, and wooden staffs. Their eyes scanned the horizon for any sign of the fire, while their hearts ached for those they could not save. The sky was a dull gray, and the wind carried with it the faint crackle of distant flames, like the world itself was warning them of what was to come. Families whispered prayers that clung to the edges of the square, and mingled with the wind a promise of endurance and remembrance. The council had abandoned them, yes, but in the absence of help, humans discovered the first glimmer of unity and courage. They spoke quietly to one another, pledging to hold hands through the smoke, to carry each other, if needed, to fight the fire not with vengeance, but with survival and determination. The village bell rang once, a hollow sound that echoed across the streets, signaling that the time for farewells had come. Mothers held children one last time. Fathers shook hands and nodded silently, as if words were unnecessary. The humans stepped back and looked around at one another, taking in the faces of friends, neighbors, and family. Their hearts beat as one. In that moment, the first step toward the unknown had been taken, and although the fire waited on the horizon, they had found in each other a spark, a resolve, a defiance that no counsel could extinguish. The last embrace lingered in the square, and then slowly, one by one, the humans began to move forward, their steps measured yet determined, each footfall carrying the weight of loss, hope, and courage toward a future that would be forged in the heat of flames. From the edge of the forest, the first glow appeared, faint at first, a flicker of orange that seemed almost playful against the gray dawn, but as the humans watched, it grew larger, fiercer, like a living creature awakening from a long slumber. The wind shifted, carrying heat, and the faint crackle of distant fire that made the hairs on the backs of necks rise. The villagers paused for a moment, hearts pounding and eyes wide, staring at the horizon where the flames danced and twisted like serpents. In the sky, children clung to parents and siblings, gripping hands tightly, while elders whispered encouragement that sounded small against the roar of the approaching danger. The young warriors took the lead, scanning the trees and the path ahead, their weapons ready, their breath steady despite the tremor of fear in their chests. Every footfall on the soft earth seemed louder now, as if announcing defiance against the threat. The glow of the fire cast strange shadows across their faces, illuminating determination and terror in equal measure. The scent of smoke grew stronger, carrying with it the faint bitterness of ash and the promise of destruction. The humans tightened the bundles on their backs, ensuring every possession and supply was secure. Mothers adjusted blankets around children, keeping them close and safe, while fathers led the way, scouting for obstacles, for signs of wildlife fleeing the flames, and for any hint of safe passage ahead. The villagers moved together as a single entity, a woven tapestry of strength and vulnerability, of courage and fear. Each step forward was a statement, each glance at one another a silent pact that no one would be left behind. The forest around them shivered as if aware of the approaching fire. Leaves rustled, and branches swayed unnaturally, casting flickering shadows across faces streaked with sweat and dirt. Some children whimpered softly, while others held their ground, copying the composure of those older than them. The flames now grew taller and more insistent, glowing like molten gold in the distance, beckoning and threatening at once. Sparks occasionally leaped from faraway trees, riding the wind like fiery messengers of doom, and the humans flinched yet pressed on. The elders guided the pace, reminding everyone that haste could be deadly, and that patience and careful movement could mean survival. The first scorched branches fell near their path, a warning. The heat on their faces grew more intense, and the smell of burning wood thickened in the air. The humans spoke little, for words seemed trivial against the enormity of what approached, yet their eyes communicated plans and fears and reassurances. The wind carried the echo of crackling fire and distant cries, and in that moment every heartbeat felt amplified, every breath heavier. Every glance at the horizon reminded them that the council had abandoned them, that help would not come from above, and that the fire would test them beyond anything they had imagined. Yet even in the shadow of destruction, a quiet determination rose from the group, a defiance that whispered, "We will not falter, we will face this together." The glow of the flames painted the world in shifting hues of orange and red, and as they moved closer, the humans felt the weight of destiny pressing against their shoulders. The forests trembled around them, and the fire waited, and still they marched, one step after another, hearts bound by courage and fear, and the knowledge that turning back was no longer an option. Step by step they advanced into the heat, their feet crunching on the scorched earth and hearts hammering against ribs like war drums. The first waves of flames licked the edges of the path, their tongues orange and red, hungrily reaching for anything that moved. The humans pressed forward, shoulders squared and eyes fixed on the horizon, though sweat ran into their eyes and burns stung their skin. They did not falter. Children clutched hands of parents and older siblings, drawing courage from each other. Mothers whispered soft songs and prayers that mingled with the hiss of the fire. Fathers scanned constantly for danger, adjusting the course when necessary, keeping the group together and safe as best they could. The wind shifted, sending showers of sparks across faces and clothes, and the humans ducked or leaped over fallen branches, as if the forest itself was a battlefield, and every ember a weapon. The young warriors took point, their arrows and spears ready, their movements precise. Despite the chaos around them, the scent of burning wood and scorched earth filled their nostrils, heavy and pungent, and each breath felt like fire in their lungs. Yet they marched on, knowing that hesitation meant death, and that courage was the only shield they possessed. The fire was alive. It seemed to roar and hiss, mocking them, daring them to turn back. But the humans met it with steady eyes and steady feet. Each glance at a companion carried silent messages of encouragement, of solidarity, of strengths drawn from shared fear and determination. Some stumbled and fell into ash, choking and coughing, but hands were immediately offered, and bodies lifted again onto weary shoulders. The elders moved slowly but deliberately, guiding and advising their people, reminding them that panic was a traitor and focus was survival. The forest seemed endless, yet every step forward carried the weight of defiance, and the knowledge that they would not yield. The flames now danced higher and closer, enveloping trees and ground in their molten glow. Sparks flew like tiny comets, and smoke curled into the sky, painting the world in orange and black. Every face in the group glistened with sweat, soot, and determination, yet no one turned. Both the humans became a single living organism, moving together, breathing together, feeling the fire as if it were an extension of themselves, yet refusing to be consumed by midday. The heat pressed against them like a physical hand, scorching faces and blistering skin, but the pace never slowed, each footfall a testament to courage. Each human carried their own fear, silently masking it behind set jaws and fierce eyes. Their voices were few, words only exchanged when necessary, but even in silence, their hearts spoke determination to each other, and to the fire itself. We will not fall, we will endure, we will survive. The path narrowed, and the flames roared louder. Sparks showered down, igniting small fires around them, but they pressed on, as one. Every stumble met with helping hands, every tear met with encouragement, every cry of fear met with whispered courage. The fire tested them and burned them and tried to shake their resolve, but the humans walked into it as if it were a gauntlet. They were meant to pass, knowing that the journey through the flames was not just survival but a forging of spirit and will, a proof that even abandoned by the council they would face the inferno together and march on with hearts unbroken and eyes fixed on the uncertain horizon. Some fell and cries tore through the thick smoke. Their voices carried fear and pain, and yet the humans refused to stop or falter. Those who stumbled into the fire were quickly lifted by others' hands, gripping tightly, dragging them back from the heat and the edge of despair. Every loss was a reminder of the stakes, and every rescue a testament to courage. The group moved like a living chain, pulling each other forward, refusing to leave anyone behind. The flames crackled hungrily around them, sending sparks and embers into the air that landed on skin and clothing, burning but never breaking the will of those who marched on. Mothers clutched children, pressing them close, shielding them from the worst of the heat, while fathers and warriors formed protective circles around the most vulnerable. Each step forward, a delicate balance of survival and defiance. The forest seemed alive, and malicious branches bent and twisted, falling in paths meant to hinder the humans, and the ground beneath them gave way in patches of ash and scorched soil, yet they advanced inch by inch, hearts pounding, lungs burning, sweat and soot coating their bodies, their eyes fixed on the path ahead, and the faint promise of safety beyond the fire. Some screamed in pain as burns and smoke clawed at them, but hands were there to lift arms and shoulders and encourage. Words whispered through the roar of the flames. Keep going, we will survive, do not give up. Each stumble became a lesson, each moment of fear transformed into determination. The elders guided quietly, their eyes scanning constantly for danger and offering advice on footing, on timing, on breathing. The young warriors pressed forward, testing paths and shielding the weak from falling debris and sudden bursts of flame. Every ember that landed harmlessly on cloth or hair became a small victory, and each person saved a triumph against the relentless inferno. The humans began to feel themselves transformed by the heat, by the danger, by the shared struggle. The fire was testing not just bodies but spirits and hearts, and in each act of sacrifice, each rescue, each step forward, a quiet courage was born. They were forging themselves into something stronger, something unbroken, despite the council having abandoned them, and the world around them trying to consume them. The wind shifted and carried the distant smell of scorched earth, and the faint cries of animals fleeing for survival, reminding them of the vastness of what they faced. Yet they pressed on, united and unyielding. Sweat and ash-streaked faces glistened in the fiery glow, and eyes met in silent agreement that they would not falter. The fire could take flesh and blood, but not the will, not the bond, not the courage that had grown in each heart. The humans walked on through smoke and flame, helping, lifting, protecting, and carrying each other forward. Every sacrifice strengthening the resolve of those who remained. The path narrowed and heat pressed closer, threatening to engulf them, but still They moved together knowing that every step through the inferno was a step toward survival, and that even if some were lost, the spirit of the group would endure. They would emerge, forged in courage, tempered in fire, and bound together by the trials that could not be ignored. The fire demanded tribute, and they paid it willingly, yet their resolve grew unbroken and stronger with every heartbeat and every step. Sparks rained down from twisted trees ablaze, and the humans ducked and turned as embers struck skin and hair, the heat pressing against them like a living force, the forest itself a roaring cage of fire and smoke that threatened to consume every step. The air was thick with ash, and the smell of burning wood filled nostrils and lungs, making each breath a labor and each heartbeat a drum of defiance. The villagers pressed forward in tight clusters, holding hands, shoulders brushing to remind each other they were not alone. Children whimpered softly yet drew courage from the firm grips of their parents and siblings, while elders moved slowly, carefully guiding them around fallen trees and patches of scalded earth. Every step was deliberate, and every glance at the fire reminded them that hesitation meant death. The flames twisted and curled like serpents dancing along the trunks of blackened trees, and the ground beneath their feet glowed in places with embers that hissed when touched. Their clothes were singed and faces streaked with soot, sweat, and tears, yet they did not falter. The young warriors led the way, constantly scanning for danger and offering hands to those who stumbled, their eyes sharp and unyielding. Their movements were precise yet fluid, each step forward a statement of courage, and each rescue an act of defiance. The wind shifted, sporadically sending sparks flying into the humans' faces and hair, yet they pressed on, whispering encouragement and reassurance to one another. We can do this, we will survive, do not falter, keep moving. The forest seemed endless and unyielding, yet the humans moved as one, a single organism fueled by fear and determination, and the desire to see each other safe. The smoke thickened and made eyes water and throat burn, but still they went on, their hearts beating as one. Their shadows danced across the glowing forest floor, flickering with the flames around them, creating strange shapes that seemed to mock and challenge them. The elders spoke rarely, but their voices carried authority and comfort, guiding the humans around pockets of heat and fallen branches, offering advice on how to step safely and breathe without panicking. Each human carried their own fear silently, masked by determination, yet the group drew strength from one another, holding hands, offering words, touching shoulders to convey courage and solidarity. The path narrowed further, and the flames roared louder, the fire now reaching the treetops and smoke curling thick like molten rivers through the forest. Yet the humans marched forward, their feet crunching on scorched earth, their bodies tired and aching, but their resolve unbroken. Their eyes scanned constantly the fiery path ahead, and each glance exchanged carried silent promises of protection and endurance. Every ember that landed harmlessly on clothing or skin was a small victory, every rescued stumble a triumph over despair. The humans began to feel themselves transformed, not just by heat but by courage, each step through the inferno forging unity and unyielding will. Their hearts beat together, their breaths mingled, their fears shared, and in the chaos of fire and smoke they discovered strength beyond what they had imagined. They were no longer merely surviving, they were moving with purpose and resolve toward a destiny defined not by the council but by their own courage, and the bonds that could not be broken even by the flames. Through the choking smoke and the roar of the flames, the humans saw a faint shimmer in the distance, a dark outline against the fiery sky that promised something more than destruction. At first it was only a shadow, like a trick of the heat haze, but as they pressed forward step by weary step, the shape revealed itself as a mountain, rising tall and solemn against the horizon. Its surface was black and jagged, yet at its base a narrow path opened like a wound in the rock. The humans slowed their pace, staring at the passage with disbelief and wonder, for beyond the gap there appeared to be no fire, no smoke, only a valley of untouched green, stretching wide and full of life. The children gasped with relief, eyes wide at the sight of trees, with leaves still fresh and streams of water glistening in the dim light. The mothers tightened their grip on little ones, whispering thanks into the smoky air, while fathers exchanged glances of cautious hope as if daring not to trust what they saw lest it vanish into illusion. The young warriors stood guard at the mouth of the passage, scanning for danger, their hearts torn between suspicion and longing, while the elders raised their arms and spoke words of courage and blessing, urging the humans forward. The air inside the passage was cool compared to the inferno behind them, and as they stepped cautiously into the shadows of the mountain, a hush fell over the group. Their lungs burned lest their skins stung less, and for the first time in days they could breathe without fear of smoke. Some collapsed collapsed to their knees, tears streaking their soot-covered faces, not from sorrow but from relief, hands pressed to the earth as if to confirm it was real. The children ran ahead laughing, though their voices cracked with exhaustion, their bare feet slapping against stone as they entered the valley beyond the narrow corridor. The valley opened wide, bathed in soft light, untouched by the destruction that raged outside. Birds sang in the distance and the air carried the sweet scent of flowers and fresh grass. The humans stared in awe, eyes wide, hearts pounding, unable to believe that such a place could exist. While the world burned only steps away, the elders proclaimed it a sanctuary, a gift of fate, or perhaps a test that they had endured and passed. Their words filled the humans with renewed strength and purpose. Mothers unwrapped children from blankets, letting them feel the cool air on their skin. Fathers set down heavy bundles and lifted children onto shoulders, showing them the beauty of the valley. With tears in their eyes, the young warriors who had kept their fear hidden, now allowed themselves a moment of relief, leaning on weapons and watching the horizon where the fire still roared. Unable to reach this place, the humans gathered together, their hearts swelling with gratitude and hope. They had walked into the fire, they had endured loss and pain and betrayal, and yet here they stood in a land untouched, fertile, alive, a place to begin anew. Though the flames still consumed the world behind them, they knew the valley would be their salvation. The council had abandoned them, but they had discovered their own path, carved by courage, lit by fire, and sealed by unity. And in this hidden valley, they would build not just a refuge, but a future. Emerging from the fire, the humans stood in silence, breathing deeply the cool air of the valley, their bodies weary and burned, yet their spirits alive, stronger than ever before. Behind them the horizon glowed red and black, a sea of smoke and flame, swallowing the world they had once called home. But ahead stretched a land untouched, fertile and filled with life. They gazed upon rivers that glistened under the pale light of dawn, upon fields of green swaying gently in the wind, and upon trees that stood tall and unscarred by fire. It was as if they had stepped into another world, a world meant for them, and them alone. The children ran freely for the first time in days, their laughter carrying across the valley like a song of survival. Mothers wept with relief, holding each other and thanking whatever unseen power had guided them through the inferno. Fathers laid down their burdens, staring at the fertile ground with eyes that saw not only safety but possibility. They began to plan in hushed voices where to build homes, how to plant crops, and how to protect this new land from dangers yet unseen. The young warriors stood at the edge of the valley, their eyes fixed on the burning horizon behind them, the hands still gripping weapons tightly, though their shoulders relaxed. For the first time they knew the fire would not follow them here yet. Their duty had not ended, for they understood that survival was not simply reaching the valley but ensuring it remained a sanctuary. The elders spoke slowly with reverence, their voices echoing in the cool air. They reminded the humans that this was not the end but the beginning, that the betrayal of the council had forced them into the flames, but that fire had forged them into something stronger. The humans listened, heads bowed, hearts pounding with the weight of truth. They had lost much, they had left behind homes and loved ones and the comfort of familiarity, yet they had gained something far greater: unity, courage, and a destiny carved not by rulers in high halls but by their own will and sacrifice. Together they began to work, using what little tools they had to clear the land, to gather food and water, to build shelters of wood and stone. The valley echoed with the sounds of life, not of despair but of creation, of rebirth. The children played between the half-built homes, their laughter mingling with the rhythm of hammers and the rustle of leaves in the wind. The mothers and fathers toiled side by side, their sweat now a gift to the soil rather than a sacrifice to fire. The young warriors patrolled the edges of the valley, watchful but hopeful, knowing that their duty was not just protection but also the preservation of hope. The humans gathered at dusk around a great fire of their own, not one that devoured but one that gave warmth and light. They shared food and stories, their faces glowing in the firelight, their voices carrying into the night. They remembered those who had been lost and honored them not with sorrow but with determination to build a future worthy of their sacrifice. As the stars appeared above and the valley settled into quiet, the humans looked at one another and knew that though the council had abandoned them, they had not been destroyed. They had walked into the flames, they had endured the inferno, and they had emerged, not broken but reborn, forged in fire, bound by unity. They had found their destiny in the valley of survival, and no power would take it from them.